Dr. Gates, tell me a little bit about the timeliness of the Reconstruction series. Why now?
12 years of black freedom, followed by an alt-right rollback, a president immediately following Abraham Lincoln who refused to renounce white supremacy, a conservative Supreme Court that effectively undid the power of the 14th and 15th Amendments. What's that sound like?
Contemporary times.
Contemporary times. So it was obvious that we could teach our fellow citizens in America about the perilous moment in which we're living by analogy through telling the story of Reconstruction and its rollback. And I first started thinking about it after the horrible murders of Reverend Clementa Pinckney and the other innocents at Mother Emanuel Church, because the justifications that Dylann Roof summoned for his actions were very reminiscent of racist rhetoric about black people immediately following the Civil War and following Reconstruction. And I was shocked. It's almost like a horror movie when you think that the vampire's dead, and all of a sudden they come up out of the casket, and you think, damn, I thought I put a stake in your heart. I thought that the worst and most pernicious, heinous aspects of anti-black white supremacy were long gone, and I was naive about that. And we've seen a rise in hate speech, anti-Semitism, anti-gay attitudes, and when people become frightened, particularly about their economic future, they look for scapegoats. And the scapegoats traditionally have been Jewish people, women, gay people, and of course in this country, people of color. So it's a moral, a lesson. Let's don't go back to what happened with the rollback to Reconstruction.
Reconstruction is such an important part of American history, and yet it is so misunderstood. Why is that? Why is it that we don't have a better understanding of this period and what it actually meant?
Well, W.E. Du Bois wrote a book in 1935 called Black Reconstruction. And one chapter is called The Propaganda of History. And he analyzes how white historians had written about Reconstruction. And that was part of the rollback, to create a mythology of black incompetence, that black men had been elected to office and couldn't properly serve, that black voters had been manipulated by northern scallywags and carpetbaggers, that basically they were tools and pawns, that they were dishonest. Robert Smalls was one of the greatest heroes of the Civil War and Reconstruction, served 5 non-consecutive terms in Congress because he was constantly being accused yet of stealing money and misappropriating funds. There was a mythology sanctioned by the discipline of history located at Columbia University called the Dunning School, led by historian Professor Dunning. And they found every way to traduce the achievements of black people. And that has only been undone by historians since Du Bois published Black Reconstruction, and most notably under the leadership of another Columbia professor, Professor Eric Foner, with whom we made our Reconstruction series. He was our chief consultant. Plus, we have over 40 historians doing modern, cutting-edge scholarship on Reconstruction, whom we feature in the series. So it's very much a collective series, and it's very much a counterpoint to the received interpretations of Reconstruction fabricated by the Dunning School.
Well, for us,
this is the Foner School.
The Foner School. For us in South Carolina, it has a very special meaning. Why is the state of South Carolina so pivotal to an understanding of Reconstruction?
South Carolina was ground zero for Reconstruction because it was a majority black state. There's a famous 1872 lithograph of the first colored senator and the members of the House of Representatives, and 3 of those men in that lithograph were from South Carolina. When Richard T. Greener graduated from Harvard, the first black man to graduate from Harvard in the class of 1870, where was the land of opportunity? Was it in New York? Was it in Boston? Was it in Philadelphia? Charleston. Came to Charleston and went to Columbia and served on the faculty and took law classes there. A black man from England, from Liverpool, England, Robert Brown Elliott, came to Boston in 1867 with the British Navy, could smell the opportunity, headed straight to South Carolina and worked for Richard Harvey Kane's newspaper, then was elected to Congress. Very eloquent man. And this was where it was at. This is where it was happening. And when I interviewed Representative Clyburn, his office in the Congress.
Well, he's long been a student of Reconstruction.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a museum. You go in there and all these brothers are on the wall. And we talked about the fact that South Carolina had a black majority in the House of Representatives. You can't imagine that now. South Carolina, even in the 18th century, was called Negro country. It was a black state. And very soon that was dismantled. So it's no surprise that many of the most vicious battles over race occurred here, because it was an attempt to control this black majority. I went to Calhoun College at Yale University, and John C. Calhoun was an intellectual racist. He not only wanted slavery to continue, he wanted to resurrect the slave trade. He was a rough brother.
What do you feel were the most important and most significant aspects of Reconstruction, the real positives?
The establishment of black social institutions, particularly the churches, fraternal organizations, social organizations, the fact that so many of the slaves wanted to get married and legalize their love relationships, the taking out of ads in newspapers to reunite families, and the fact that 80% of the eligible black men in the South registered to vote in what I call the first Freedom Summer, the summer of 1867, and 500,000 of them cast their votes in the general election of 1868 for Ulysses S. Grant. That's amazing. And people formed schools, historically black, what we now call historically black colleges and universities like Shaw and Howard, but elementary schools.
And in South Carolina, Allen and Benedict and Claflin.
Absolutely. And, you know, just elementary schools that the slaves had a hunger for learning, because they knew that the most valuable thing that had been kept for them was knowledge of reading and writing. And they knew that was the pathway to success.
Isn't it interesting that public education grew out of this period, and particularly was spearheaded here in our state by Robert Smalls?
Right. There weren't statewide public school systems. And the Reconstruction governments, particularly in South Carolina, and particularly as designed by Robert Smalls, established statewide public school educational systems, which hadn't been done before, which is a shock to people. And that's because black people understood the value of education.
It's also interesting, though, that things like public education and certainly enfranchisement and economic development, all these positives that grew out of the Reconstruction period are still under assault in modern times.
Yeah, it is. And we have to, any society is judged by the quality of its public education. And we as Americans should be embarrassed at how we've allowed our public schools, which are populated by brilliant teachers who are so motivated, but they're underpaid and under-resourced. And we should be ashamed of that.
You know, people have a general idea that the collapse of Reconstruction was solely in the hands of the South. That's not true, is it?
No, the collapse of Reconstruction was a conspiracy between economic interests and political interests in the North and in the South. They said 12 years is enough. There was the economic panic of 1873, which was called the First Great Depression. And people looked around and said, why we spend all the money on these Negroes in the South? Let them thrive. They're free now. And they acted, Beryl, as if 200 years of slavery could be wiped out with no reparations, with no benefits given, no 40 acres and a mule, no help. That each of these people were on their own. Not only that, new forms of oppression were institutionalized. Debt peonage, sharecropping,
The rise of the Klan.
the rise of the coup, terrorism. And so very much Reconstruction is about issues that still roil our society today. Who has the right to be a citizen? Who has the right to be an American? What is the relationship between political and economic democracy? And what is the role of terrorism in the healthy functioning of a democracy? What's the role of the chief executive in the face of the manifestations of terrorism?
How can we have this very blatant reminder from 150 years ago and not be mindful of its impact today?
That's why Dylan McGee and I made this series. And with PBS, we'll get, and I am on the road. You know, I flew down to Beaufort from Harvard. I did my official duties. I jumped on JetBlue and came down here because I wanted a South Carolina screening to remind people that this is ground zero, that then is now. And I want to do one in Charleston, and I want to do one at the Penn Center as well. It is very important that the country understand that we made this series about the current racial climate in the United States, though it's through the mirror and the analogy of Reconstruction and its rollback called redemption.
One final question. What is the measure of success for you for this series?
First of all, I want Reconstruction modules. First, I want Reconstruction modules to be created in the classroom so that Reconstruction is as central to a course in American history as the Civil War is, or World War I or World War II. Reconstruction was our first experiment with interracial democracy, and it was crushed. And the only way that we're going to survive as a society is if we fashion forms of interracial democracy and collaboration that allow a multiplicity of voices, sexual orientations, religious beliefs, etc., gender identities, to thrive and live in harmony and peace. That's my goal in creating this series, and I hope people will watch it.
Dr. Henry Louis Gates, Jr., thank you.
Thank you. I could talk to you all day. Always a pleasure.